September 16th, 1979. 2:28 a.m. 2,000 meters above East Germany, 8 people are packed into a basket barely bigger than a bathtub. Above them, a homemade hot air balloon. And it's tearing apart. Not metaphorically, literally. A gash has opened in the fabric, bleeding hot air into a sky that's -8 degrees Celsius. The burner just died. The balloon begins to drop, and directly below them is one of the most heavily defended borders in human history. Minefields, automatic shrapnel guns, 50,000 soldiers with orders that required no paperwork. Just a trigger. The only person who can save them is a 24-year-old bricklayer with one match left. He looks at his children. He strikes it. But to understand why 8 civilians are floating over a militarized border in a handmade balloon, you have to go back 6 weeks earlier. The Stasi, East Germany's secret police, the most feared surveillance apparatus in human history, had already found the wreckage of their first attempt, already identified their district, already had informants visiting fabric merchants and asking questions about large orders. These 2 families built this balloon while being hunted. So how does a bricklayer and an electrician outwit an entire police state? In 1979, 17 million people lived inside East Germany, and leaving the country was illegal. The East German border wasn't just a wall, it was the architecture of punishment. It was a system designed to kill anyone who tried to escape. 1,400 kilometers of barriers, concrete walls, razor wire fences, guard towers every 500 meters, staffed by soldiers trained to treat hesitation as weakness. And between those fences, a strip of sand. Every morning it was perfectly raked, not for cleanliness, so footprints would appear instantly. Hidden in the fencing were SM-70 splitter mines, tripwire-activated fragmentation devices mounted on fence posts. No soldier required. Touch the wire, and a lethal cone of metal fragments would tear through your body within 25 meters. By 1979, every known escape method had failed. People tried tunnels. Seismic sensors detected digging within hours. They tried hiding in cars. Guards dismantled vehicles piece by piece. They tried swimming across the Baltic Sea. Patrol boats hunted them with spotlights. Most were shot in the water. By the late 1970s, every escape route had been sealed, except one, because no one had thought to look up. Peter Strelzik was an electrician, 37 years old, a former Air Force mechanic who understood how machines worked and how to build them from scrap. His friend Günter Wetzel was a bricklayer, 24 years old, the kind of man who could lay 10,000 bricks without losing count. They worked at the same factory, they lived in the same town, and they shared the same quiet dread. Their children would grow up in a prison, unless they escaped. Peter had an idea so absurd it might actually work. A hot air balloon. No engine, no registered parts, no serial numbers, no mechanical components that trigger surveillance flags, just fabric and fire. But lifting 8 people required 800 square meters of material. In East Germany, buying that much fabric at the wrong store could produce a Stasi file by morning. So they had to build it quietly, secretly, and fast. For months they worked at night. Peter welded a burner frame from scrap metal in his garage. When he first tested it, a 12-meter column of flame shot into the air and burned off his eyebrows. Meanwhile, Günter's wife Petra sewed balloon panels together, night after night, until her fingers bled. Finally, in the spring of 1978, the balloon was ready. They drove it into a forest clearing, inflated it, lit the burner, and waited. The balloon lifted, for a moment, then it sagged, collapsed, and died. They had made one fatal mistake. The fabric was cotton. Cotton breathes, which meant the hot air bled straight out before it could lift anything. Months of work, nearly a year's wages, completely useless. Peter burned the balloon in his furnace piece by piece, so the neighbors wouldn't notice. Most people would have stopped there. They didn't stop. This time they tested fabrics like engineers. Gunter's kitchen became a laboratory. Fabric samples spread across the table, testing heat, testing airflow, testing everything. Eventually they found it. Synthetic taffeta. Lightweight, airtight, perfect. The problem? Buying enough of it looked deeply suspicious. They drove 160 kilometers to Leipzig, walked into a fabric store, and told the clerk they were starting a sailing club. A special order was placed, paperwork, records, and a very real possibility that a clerk would flag the purchase to authorities. They returned the next morning, expecting handcuffs. Instead, 800 square meters of taffeta, neatly rolled. They drove home at exactly the speed limit, hearts pounding the entire way. July 3rd, 1979. The Wetzel family stayed at home. Gunter had doubts about the margins, so Peter launched with his wife and 2 sons. For 8 minutes, everything worked. The balloon rose, 500 meters, 1,000 meters, 2,000 meters, riding a favorable wind northwest. Then it entered a cloud. Moisture soaked the fabric. The balloon began losing heat. The altimeter needle turned downward. They crashed in a forest inside the restricted border zone, 180 meters short of West Germany. The families scrambled out of the wreckage. 9 hours of crawling through the death strip, avoiding raked sand, freezing, silent. By morning they reached their car. They drove through checkpoints claiming they'd been camping. They thought it was over. It wasn't. The nightmare was only beginning, because the balloon was still there, waiting to be found. The next morning, border guards discovered the wreckage. 800 square meters of foreign fabric tangled in the trees near the kill zone. The Stasi launched one of the largest manhunts in years. They questioned fabric merchants, interviewed factory workers, tracked vehicle tires near the launch site. Peter immediately sold his car. If investigators matched the tire tracks, the families were finished. For 6 weeks, both families lived in a state of quiet terror. Every knock at the door, every car that slowed on their street could be the Stasi. Then newspapers across East Germany published a strange notice. Authorities were seeking citizens who had recently purchased large amounts of fabric. The word balloon never appeared, probably to prevent imitation, but the message was clear. The state was hunting them, and they were getting closer. So they made a decision that made no rational sense. They would try again. But this time the balloon would be twice as large, 20 meters tall, over 1,200 square meters of fabric. They couldn't buy material in bulk anymore. That trail was too hot. So they collected it in fragments. Umbrella silk from market stalls, tent nylon bought in small quantities across 3 different towns, striped taffeta from a shop 2 hours away. Petra and her sister-in-law sewed it together by hand across 14 nights, working in total silence after the children were asleep. The result looked less like an aircraft and more like a giant patchwork quilt, but it might fly, if the police didn't catch them first. September 16th, 1:30 a.m. In the early hours of that morning, both families loaded their children into cars, telling no one, leaving behind everything they owned. They drove to a remote meadow outside Posnick, under a moonless sky. Inflation took 40 minutes. Every minute felt like an hour. A night watchman in the nearest town radioed a report about an unidentified glowing object on the horizon. The families had seconds. 8 people scrambled into a basket. The tether ropes were cut, first, second, but the third snagged. The balloon tilted violently. The burner flame licked the nylon edge. A section caught fire. Children screamed. Gunter had anticipated this. He discharged a fire extinguisher and killed the flames in 4 seconds. A blackened patch remained. They were rising. What none of them knew, that fire had compromised the fabric. A tear was already forming. At altitude, it would begin to matter. 100 meters, 500, 2,000. Below them, searchlights swept the sky in frantic arcs. Border guards tracking the glowing object climbing fast from the tree line. There was nothing they could do. No aircraft could scramble in time. No weapon could reach that altitude. For the first time in their lives, all 8 of them existed outside the regime's reach. Then the tear opened. Hot air poured through the gash in a visible stream. The burner sputtered and died. 1 second of freefall. Basket swaying, envelope losing its shape. Children shrieking. Gravity suddenly present in a way it hadn't been. Gunter braced against the gondola frame, fingers numb. It was -8 degrees Celsius up there. He struck his last match. It caught on the first try. The burner roared back. The balloon steadied. But now they were burning fuel to compensate for the leak. The gauge dropped in real time. 3 minutes of propane left, maybe 5. No way to know how far the border still was. Peter and Gunter scanned the ground for the one visual cue they'd memorized. East German towns ran on old incandescent bulbs. Cold, white, dim. Western towns burned amber and red from neon signs and modern street lamps. Below them, amber. Then a highway. Headlights streaming along it. The Autobahn. Someone broke the silence. Just 3 words, barely audible. We are over. The last of the propane burned out. The balloon became a collapsing parachute, dropping through pine canopy toward a Bavarian forest. The basket hit the ground hard, tipped, and threw everyone into the undergrowth. Silence. Then a child crying. Gunter grabbed his leg, broken or close to it. Everyone else. Cuts, bruises, pine needles in their hair. Alive. Peter found a dirt road. A police car appeared. He stepped into the headlights with his hands raised, not knowing yet which side of the border he was on. Then he saw it. An Audi. He knew exactly what that meant. East German police drove Wartburgs and Ladas, Soviet-built cars that every citizen behind the Iron Curtain knew by sight. An Audi was Western. An Audi meant freedom. One officer stepped out, looked at him, and said the words he had risked everything to hear. You are in West Germany. You are safe. Peter Strelzik, the man who had burned 2 failed balloons and launched a 3rd under an active manhunt, sank to his knees on the road. 28 minutes. That's all the flight had taken. 18 months of secret labor, 2 failed attempts, a nationwide dragnet. 28 minutes. At sunrise, the world saw the photographs. A strange patchwork balloon lying in a Bavarian meadow. 8 exhausted fugitives wrapped in police blankets. But back in East Germany, the Stasi had already started arresting their relatives. The regime had been humiliated, and it moved quickly to close every possible gap. Propane purchases were now tracked. Large fabric orders triggered investigations. The system adapted, but it was already too late. 2 families had found the one weakness in a prison designed to be perfect. They didn't dig under it. They didn't break through it. They simply went over it.